which I wouldn't mind if some of you moved forward and came up the front a little bit, because we could make that more of a personal discussion, and I'm a sort of a personal type guy. So if you'd like to do that, I'll pause for a moment, and thank you for moving forward. That's encouraging. The other thing, I've made some notes because it was a long flight. I made lots of notes, and it's too long. So if I skip through them and miss out about a third of it, I'll be able to handle it within the prescribed time. There are lots of links and lots of references to some very interesting books and other references. I will get back to the organisers with the complete transcript with all the links within a day and a half of me returning to Australia. So that's it. So all I can say is it time for a peaceful revolt? Probably is if we've tried everything else, and I have. It's so good to be with a bunch of dedicated libertarians like yourselves, and to renew my association with this great organisation. I was an active participant in the very first Liberty International Conference in Zurich in 1982, and then again in London in 1984. And it was interesting that it was explained that Jim is the historian. I will send him some digitised photos that I took from both of those conferences, because they had some remarkable characters in them, and I used a lot of those ideas that I gathered up in those two conferences to build into my early arsenal when I set out on my libertarian journey. Again, I hope to pick up some ideas from you all and take them back to Australia with me, and in return I might share with you today some of the ideas and things that we've been doing over the years that have worked, and even confess to some of the things that haven't worked, because they might save you time. And time, of course, is the very finite element that we're always short of. We have a huge task ahead of us to libertarianise the whole world. But let's not be daunted by such a task. I think if we start with libertarianising ourselves, we can adopt strategies that, even under scrutiny of cost-benefit analysis, will prove to be net winners for ourselves. We can win out of all this, and I think that's important. That I've found that libertarianism has helped me in my business career. It's helped me be successful, and I can say for sure that my life would not have been the same if it hadn't have been influenced by some very major libertarians over the years. So apart from being focused, I think it's our duty to remain optimistic. Sometimes difficult, but hang in there and be an optimist. And let's talk about leadership. Leadership is something everyone talks about. You can see it every piece of paper you pick up, magazines, TV, everyone talks about leadership. But we can't all be leaders. Many of us have got other things to do. So I think leadership on the one hand is fantastic, but followership is equally important on the other hand. And this was explained well by Neil Ferguson in a recent ARC, Alliance for Responsible Citizenship panel in Australia, which was in the form of an interview by Australia's Greg Sheridan. And the panel consisted of Neil Ferguson, John Anderson, a former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia who's gone on to become one of our major intellectual influences in Australia. And Sheridan, handing over to Neil Ferguson, said, "Neil, looking out at the West, are we in this fight with a good shot? Are we going backwards? What is your net assessment?" And Ferguson said, well, my message is that leadership is important, and John was right about that, but we also need to act at the grassroots. The most important message I have for people here at ARC is to be active citizens, because the threats to our freedoms don't just come in at top level, they come in within your school, they turn up in your college campus, on your alma mater, and you have to be ready to fight the ground game to make sure that crazy ideas, whether it's about race or about gender, don't become part of the school's educational system that you have relied upon and you are sending your children and grandchildren to. So leadership, yes, we need it, and it needs to be strong, but the followership is just as important, and that's what ARC is all about. Each and every one of you can do more of the fighting that we just talked about in our daily lives. It works too. When the woke director of human resources decides that it's time for you to do a little bit of intersectionality training, say no. Just say no to all that stuff. I think if we all do this, we will have fellowship as well as leadership. Sheridan also asked John about his grandchildren and what he thinks about their future. And Anderson said that really it's an age which is surprisingly disinterested or even hostile toward the best interest of our kids. I cannot think of a policy area that we should not approach with an attitude that would mean for this would mean for our children. Economic policy, environmental policy, defence policy, tax policy, dare I say, a fiscal policy and monetary policy, and our disgusting willingness to live beyond our means and engage in intergenerational theft. I could expand on that, but I haven't got time. That was an amazing interview, and in my transcript there'll be a link to that YouTube of that interview between those amazing, very current, very, very incisive activists. So let me echo that call to action, which is a call to be an activist. There's another reason why you should be an activist. It's a hell of a lot more fun than just being a spectator. Thank you. Having decided to become an activist, you could then select which of the 4 roads ahead fit your talents and passions. Each road can be effective, but there will be one that takes you forward in perfectly pitched harmony. Just as in music, you will know when you've made the right choice. You will have the right mix, and no one else can guide you with this selection. I see the 4 roads as follows. 1, education as being a precondition for any meaningful increase in freedom. 2, economic self-protection and self-preservation. How individuals can protect themselves against inflation and other government policies. Always remember that if you get wiped out, you are of little use to anyone. Political action is the 3rd way, and it's used to roll back the power of the state and restore the rights of the individuals. The 4th is non-violent, peaceful forms of civil disobedience against governments and bureaucrats when they go beyond their legitimate functions. I always remember the wise words of Ayn Rand, who once said, "They can only do to you what you permit them to do." May I expand on these 4 roads ahead? Number 1, education has been my own choice following a short but energetic sojourn into politics, but more on that later. Education is important in developing the partnership of freedom and self-responsibility. These are interchangeable terms. as self-responsibility is impossible unless one be free, and one can only be free, and one cannot be free if not self-responsible. My mentor, Leonard E. Reed, who founded the FEE organisation, suggests that education is a civilised alternative to ramming ideas down the throats of others. Instead, he said, if we have a clever idea, just work on it. If it's any good, others will borrow it from us. This is the road ahead that our Mankell Foundation has been following. The philosopher Eric Hoffer once wrote that the central task of education is to implant a will and facility for learning. It should produce not learned, but learning people. Our Mankell Foundation's track record over almost 30 years is that we've processed over 2,500 young students through our programs, and this has given us time to evaluate how successful we've been. I estimate that about 5% of those 2,500 scholars have gone on to become activists. And that's a pretty good result compared to today with all the competing influences that are thrown at people. Our Mankell alumni have created their own organisation. They run regular events, and 4 of them are currently running as candidates in our upcoming elections. So our educational project has been successful, but it's very slow, and let me assure you that it's very challenging work, particularly dealing with woke universities. Sometimes I weep. The second is economic self-protection and self-preservation. It sounds simple and logical that we always should make decisions that will protect ourselves from inflation and the other government policies. But this is not the case, as many of these damaging policies are sold to us by politicians as being to our benefit. A short course in the vital branch of economics called public choice theory will alert you how legislation is written in favour of those few who receive the concentrated benefits. They have much to gain, so we'll work hardest to lobby for this legislation. And for many years, Mankell has been sponsoring an accredited course in public choice theory, as it also explains that the prohibitive costs of such legislation are always designed to be spread over a large number of people so that it's not life-threatening to them, so they just put up with it and go along with it. What is threatening is the multitude of all these loads and burdens being put upon us by these self-centered legislative events that the costs are being spread over all of us again and again. If you're successful with your economic self-protection and self-preservation journey, you will always have sufficient funds to defend yourself and contribute to supporting your allies on the educational and political roads ahead. If you've chosen to go into business and run a company to achieve your end goals, may I suggest an excellent guidebook. Its author is a Canadian academic, Jana Woyshine. The book's title is How to Be Profitable and Moral. It's an excellent book that illustrates how to run a company on Randian principles, available in print or audible. The third road ahead, political action and its use to roll back the power of the state and restore the rights of individuals. My own brief sojourn into politics was with 9 other Australians in 1974. We formed the Workers' Party, later renamed Progress Party. Murray Rothbard helped us write the platform, so you can imagine that it was right on target. This was an interesting experiment, and it was covered in my book called Heroic Misadventures, and there's a link to that free ebook in the notes. the chapter is called Our Very Own Political Party. Was our political party successful? Did we take over Australia? No. But we did get 3 libertarians into politics, and ever since then there has always been several successful and very influential libertarians in the Australian political scene. So that's been our success. Our political party really ended when an individual called Malcolm Fraser was elected as Prime Minister. He had just had his photo taken with Ayn Rand, and his speechwriter had written into his election speeches some wonderful free market libertarian phrases that absolutely captured our imagination. And we all said, thank God we can pull up our tent, forget about this political experiment and go back to work. So we relaxed. However, as Prime Minister, he obviously did not understand those concepts and those words himself, as he went on to become one of Australia's worst Prime Ministers. This does not indicate that you should stop trying the political method as circumstances are always changing. The political road starts with a careful study of just what is the legitimate role of government. It's not easy to answer that question, and that degree of difficulty is deliberate. For us to say that we're not interested in government or politics would only be a satisfactory answer if government or politics would leave us alone. So there's every reason to step inside this murky mess, or as Donald Trump calls it, the swamp. I've been on 2 government boards over the years, and if you think it looks bad looking in from the outside, well, you should get on the inside. It's horrific. Now, way back in 1977, when I was still drawn to the political path, I booked what was called a long-distance truck line phone call to a fellow in England called Anthony Fisher. He founded the Institute of Economic Affairs and later the Atlas Network. And his political influence fascinated me, hence my telephone call to enthusiastically encourage Anthony Fisher to visit Australia. He said he would, but I don't think he did. Because all those personal meetings with him were always elsewhere. The telephone call that day was long, and in those days interrupted every 3 minutes with warning beeps to warn you about the cost escalation as you continued to speak. I had several questions for him, and with his permission I recorded his responses. I then transcribed his comments about bringing economic principles to politics. There's a lot more in the notes that'll come, but I'll just mention one particular thing. His method, he explained, was producing thoroughly researched studies and making the resultant information freely available to politicians, intellectuals, the media, and other avenues through which the public are normally educated. Fisher said, lacking fundamental principles as guides, the politician and his party organisation are like amateur explorers marching in step to an unknown destination without a map, navigational equipment, or any factual knowledge of the stars. Inspired by Fisher's words, our Mankell Foundation produces every 4 years, we produce a document called Project Western Australia, which is a guidebook. It's a policy document. It's like an instruction book to the incoming government of the day. And each 4 years we get one of these delivered personally into the hands of every politician of all parties. With limited success, I must say, although strangely enough, that's been picked up and has been translated and is being used in Ukraine at the moment. That as an instruction book for Ukraine as they design the government that will step forward after the war. I always regarded Anthony Fisher as the most successful politician never to have entered Parliament. I've got 5 minutes. I think I can do it. Another possible deterrent from pursuing the political method right now is that politics is broken. I've got two classic examples of how politics is broken. Anyway, you guys have just recently voted for a guy as president because he doesn't look like a politician and he doesn't act like a politician. Isn't that interesting? And we wish him the very best for all of our sakes. Now that brings us to the final and fourth road ahead, that of non-violent, peaceful forms of civil disobedience. This is the road requiring that delicate balance between courage and wisdom, and that's where I'm going to concentrate my focus for my remaining useful years. Courage is less about what you're not afraid of and more about what you are afraid of but are willing to face. Wisdom is less about what you know and more about what you do not know. The particular road is by far the most interesting and deserves a more detailed treatment than this brief exploratory trip today. It may lead you to study the Fraser Institute's wonderful country comparisons, the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom. It may lead you to obtaining e-residency for Estonia and other countries where they are far more welcoming for business environments than either Australia or the US. That tiny country, Estonia, is 10 years ahead of the rest of the world in adopting a business-friendly environment. I have e-residency for Estonia, and with my EA on a Friday afternoon, several years ago, we registered 2 companies in 15 minutes online. That easy. They have got that e-commerce completely under control. Your venture into civil disobedience may also lead you to reading the inspirational works of Henry David Thoreau, and it may lead you to the incredible literature of peaceful revolt. 2 fantastic books that I'll have to skip. I just mentioned them. One book's called The Rebel by Albert Camus, who's urged us to revolt as revolt is one of the essential dimensions of human nature. The other book's by Albert Hirschman. The book's called Exit, Voice and Loyalty. It's a collection of responses to the decline in firms, organisations and states. And he asks, if we are loyal, how much should we speak up before we exit? Each society learns to live with a certain amount of such dysfunction or misbehaviour, but lest the misbehaviour feed on itself and lead to a general decay, society must be able to marshal within itself forces which will make as many of the faltering actors as possible revert to the behaviour required for its proper functioning. This road should be navigated with great care, as those less brave will envy your courage and spirit of adventure. Now, to conclude, I will add a detailed list of 12 excellent books to the appendix, to the notes. Let me mention only my 2 favourites of those 12 books. One, of course, is the wonderful book called The Impatient Libertarian. And if you haven't already got a copy of it, I have plenty of the desk out there, and I'd be so happy to sign them for you. That's one, and that will expand much further on what I've been saying today. And the other book is the book by Harry Brown called How to Be Free in an Unfree World. And I see that's the title of one of the upcoming sessions today. An absolute classic of the book. You don't have to change the world. You can you can live happily in that you just change yourself. And to conclude, always remember that the occasional revolt is a particularly good thing. And as Thomas Jefferson said, when the government fears the people, there is liberty. And when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. So the choice is ours, tyranny or liberty. Let's go for liberty. Thank you.